Hey everyone, this is Lindy from Love Create Celebrate, and I'm so excited to be finally showing you how we did the new feature wall in our dining room. Here are a couple pictures of the space before we renovated it. You might have seen the other weekend renovation video that we did where we redid this whole space in just 3 days, and I'll link it up top here for you if you haven't seen it yet. We started off by painting our entire wall. You don't have to do the paint first, but we would recommend it because it makes it easier when you're cutting into the moldings later on. We did 2 coats of paint before we started putting the molding up. The next thing we had to do was decide what angle we wanted all of our moldings to be at on the wall. My husband drew this diagram out for me that laid out the angles, all the different angles that were possible, and we decided on the 65 degrees for our entire wall. Since we knew we wanted our molding at a 65-degree angle, we started by taking a small offcut of one of our moldings and cutting it at 65 degrees to use as a template on the wall. We wanted our first board to start in the bottom left corner of the wall, so that's where we put it to make the template. We put the board on the wall and then drew a line on either side of the piece of molding. We did all of this so that we'd be able to find the correct length for the first board on the wall. To do this, we took a laser level, although you could also use a tape measure if you had 2 people to hold it on either side. The laser level is just a little bit more accurate. We put the laser on the line that we had drawn so that we knew it would be at the correct angle, and then followed the laser up to the wall, and that gave us the distance that we needed. I'll link to our laser measuring tool in the comments below. Now that you have that proper length measured, you can go to your table saw and cut your first board for the wall. All of the moldings for this project were provided by Metrie. We opted to get just a flat stock molding, 5 inches wide and 1/2 inch thick. Start by cutting a 65-degree angle at the bottom of your first piece of molding. We used our miter saw for all of our molding cuts on this wall. Next, take the measurement that you took inside on the wall and measure along the length of your flat stock molding. Once you have your angle drawn or marked, use your miter saw to cut the 65-degree angle on the other side of the board. When you're done cutting your board, bring it inside and put it up against the wall to make sure that it does fit correctly. When you know that the fit is correct, you can get ready to put your board up on the wall. To stick the board up on the wall, we used construction adhesive on the back of each piece of molding. You don't need a lot of construction adhesive. We found that if we put on too much, it was hard to get the board really nice and flat. So just use dots here and there, and that should be enough. When you're ready, bring the board up to the wall and set it in place. When you're ready, place your board on the wall and nail it in place with a nail gun. One of the things we did before we nailed the boards onto the wall was marked out lines on our wall with a pencil of where all of our studs were. That way, when we nailed the board to the wall, we could make sure that we always were putting some of the nails into studs. To make sure that the spacing between the boards was the same, we made our own spacers for this wall. We just cut a couple of scrap pine pieces into 3-inch slats, and then we used them at the top and the bottom of the boards as we were nailing them in place. We used the same spacers throughout the whole project to make sure that the spacing was always the same. As you work your way up the wall, the bottom angle on your molding is going to change and no longer be 65 degrees. So we'll show you the easiest way to measure this angle. We put a scrap piece of molding between our spacers we had made and the wall. Now take a tape measure and measure the distance at the bottom of the board. Take that same distance and mark it on the board where it meets the other edge of the molding. Once you have those two marks, you can draw a straight line between them. Now you can cut along that line with your miter saw and then use that scrap piece as a template for your next full board. Continue this process along the whole wall until your entire feature wall is done. And I just wanted to show you the whole process one more time on a different part of the wall, just to give you a really good idea of how we got these molding pieces on. So here we are using a template to mark out the spot for our new piece. Then we measured the length that we needed using our laser measuring tool. Now we're putting construction adhesive on the back of the molding piece again to put it up on the wall. Finally, we put the new piece of molding in place and nailed it up on the wall. You may have noticed that we have a really funny angle at the top of this board. I hope that you don't have to deal with any funny angles like this, but just in case you do, I'll show you what we did. We put our spacer in place and then measured how much space there was left at the top of the ceiling so that we would know how long our board would be. Next, we use this really neat angle measurement tool, which I will link to in the description as well. It's really handy for drawing out the angles. You just put it in place, set it, and then place it right on top of your board after, so you know exactly what angle to cut it at. Okay, so moving on to our window moldings. We wanted to make the transition in the molding between the windows and the feature wall molding look as seamless as possible. To do this, we filled all of those gaps with drywall compound and just puttied and sanded it until it was smooth. In some cases, we did have to use caulking to fill the bigger gaps, and then we used the drywall compound on top. Here's an example of us putting some of the caulking along the window frame. Wherever your molding meets the wall or the ceiling, you should also use caulking to fill those gaps. We used drywall compound to fill in all the nail holes on all of the boards. Once the compound was dry, we were able to sand it with one of our cordless sanders. When all of our boards were sanded and prepped, we were ready for our next coat of paint. We used a small paintbrush to edge along the ceiling, along the walls, and to paint the sides of all of the molding boards. Then we used small 3 or 4 inch foam rollers to paint the rest of the moldings. It only took 2 coats to fully cover the wall, and we were very happy with the finish when we were done. Here's our molding wall all finished. I cannot believe how beautiful it turned out. It is better than I even expected. If you haven't watched it yet, be sure to check out the video for the full weekend renovation to see everything that we tackled in just 3 days. Putting that molding up was a bit of a learning curve, but I'm so glad that we did it, and I hope you enjoyed seeing how we tackled that feature wall. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and let me know in the comments below, and hit that bell to be notified of more great DIY and renovation videos.